places, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to, I'm going to call this Season 3 of UNSUNG. I thank you for joining me, and the conversation continues. And for the first episode of the third season, I can't think of having a better, couple, I think we could call them. Ladies and gentlemen, Delaurier and JONI Kokol. How you doing? Did I get that right?
No, well, technically, you know what? I like that you're called JONI, there, Delaurier. I like it.
It works.
It works.
There actually is a Delaurier in your family.
There is.
Yeah.
Is there really?
Yeah, there is.
You see,
and in fact,
Yeah.
and that's actually a compliment to you guys, I think, because you're synonymous with each other. I mean, come on, you know what I mean? We all seen the pictures, and I think, I don't know, whose heart does it not warm when they see the two of you guys together? So
wow.
You could interchange those things and still come out the same.
When we got married, the priest tripped on our first names and called us Joy and TRONI. And TRONI has kind of stuck around. I guess it's our Brangelina couple name. Hashtag
Someone
TRONI.
wrote it on our car in the dirt.
Yeah.
TRONI.
TRONI.
Oh, really?
So
that's sticking around.
it's sticking around.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. It's good to see you guys.
Good to see you.
You know, I mean, it's been a while now.
Yeah.
We were in the studio together a while back. And in the last 3 years as well, you know, I mean, we haven't seen each other and a lot of things have been going on, of course. Can you just tell us what's been going on in the last 3 years with you guys?
Well, I think, first of all, probably the biggest thing that's kind of changed for us is that we started out songwriting. And that was kind of our bread and butter, you know, and our main focus. And then, you know, I think it would have been probably around 2019, I had decided I was songwriting with a fellow named Jerry Soretta, who's an indigenous artist from Manitoba. And we, you know, not by chance, but, you know, out of, I think, necessity, started working to produce and mix and master the tracks that we were working with Jerry. And that's kind of turned into, so the last 3 years, a big chunk of our time and effort and energy has gone into this, you know, working with artists, not only songwriting with them, but finding them songs and then helping them get onto radio, mentoring them through that process. And the last project we worked with, there was an artist from Australia. Her name's Haley Jensen. She was a finalist in The Voice and on Idol, and we had like a #1 record in Australia. And JONI had a #2 song on radio and #1 on CMT and in Australia. And so the record did really well. And Haley went on to get nominated for the Country Music Association of Australia. So there's that. It's kind of one big chunk of what we did, and you can tell them about the Scarlett Butler.
Can I?
Yeah.
Oh, you'll let me?
Yeah.
Thank you for your permission.
Just before the Scarlett Butler, though. So are you saying that together, both of you, are working, how would you say this, sort of bringing young artists up and not fashioning them or formulating them, but, sort of showing them the ropes and doing these kind of things and writing for them? Is that part of it?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that we've been doing that a long time. And some of the artists that we work with in their early stages of their career, like Lindsay L. and Tenille Townes and the Higgins, and a lot of these artists have gone on to do incredible things. And we're grateful to have had sort of a part in their early years in the business, and still stay friends with them as well, right? So it's been an awesome kind of preparation, I think, for the industries that they've gone on to do great things in. But for us, we've always, I think, nurtured young talent, both through our working with, co-writing with with artists and certainly Troy as a producer, but I think also in the songwriting community here in Calgary that we've been part of with the Calgary Songsmiths. So we've been fortunate to know so many artists kind of like who are doing crazy, amazing things now, which, you know, you just kind of have to smile and feel excited that you knew them when.
Well, totally.
Yeah.
And you know, and you're also known. And that was sort of I don't know, an interesting thing for me, because until I heard about you, which might be a simple statement, I never heard about you. So, but then when I heard about you, it was a seriousness attached to your name. And so I'm wondering, like, and you're doing a lot of producing. So where did you cut your producing chops?
On our demos. So JONI, it would have been 6 years ago, we decided together that I would leave work for a period of time. I would build a little studio for us. And we had some publishing contacts in the US that I wanted to nurture, and essentially what we ended up doing was we were sending JONI down to do this songwriting stuff. We were working on with artists, and essentially we were cutting these demos. And those demos and that work with those demos actually went from making demos to, you know, I produced a record for JONI, I produced a record for myself, and, you know, as time went on, you know, I felt comfortable enough to say, well, maybe I can do it for an artist. And so it kind of went from, it was very organic, and I don't know that it was really intentional. It just seemed like, okay, this is a possibility for us to get more work or to help our artists, you know, because if we can partner with artists when we're working with them to, you know, help them get their music out, and it's, you know, because we benefit on both ends, right?
And I think he's being humble here too, because he's won awards for production even in that time frame where he was just cutting his teeth, cutting records. But I think, you know, you've done an incredible job of just like learning that side of the business behind the console, but also like you've been celebrated for your production as well, which is, I think, really amazing and shows, you know, and I often hear him having conversations with young artists, encouraging them to learn the ropes, how to record their own music as well, because, you know, if you think of like Colby Calais, who recorded her Grammy nominated record in her bedroom, and, you know, and I know Troy like was such a voice for those artists learning their own Pro Tools chops, and to be able to at least know the process that goes into creating a record and do some of it for themselves to cut down costs, etc. So
yeah, and that it's possible.
Well, it's far more accessible now that, you know, you don't need a Neve board and a Studer 2-inch reel to do it anymore, and $1 million before you start. So when you talk about producing, are you talking about, like, you know, the more technical side of things, or are you talking about the arrangement side, or is it all of it?
It's all of it.
Yeah.
So I would, like most of the artists we're working with now, we are writing on those projects, and then when I'm doing the production side, there's the arranging part of it, you know, what parts we're getting, and sometimes we're hiring people to play stuff. Often I'm playing it all myself. And then there's the side of mixing it, actually getting it sonically to a place where it's comparable to, you know, songs out on contemporary radio, or if it's folk radio or whatever it is. So, you know, and sometimes I'm even mastering it. And you know, I would say the projects, like the label acts that we're working with, those, you know, I will usually forego the mixing process, but sometimes not, because at the end of the day, by the time we've written the song and produced it and we've come up with all these ideas, by the time it's ready for mixing, it's kind of already there half the time. So it really just depends, but generally we're doing it all.
Because you're ducking a lot of stuff as you're going along, and you're mixing down you know, the parts to hear what they're saying. Like
and so mix, and I think that part for me is super enjoyable. But I also feel for us, you know, as a music business, it's important for us to try to you know, realize as much of the vision as we can, and sometimes we don't. Like sometimes we, like when we're working with people, we're not 100% sure. Well, what should this song be, and you know, what kind of you know, we really have to make sure that we're you know, the vision of the artist is being executed properly, and that we're doing the best job we can. And if we're not capable of doing it, I'm also okay with saying, you know what, this is not something I can play as a guitar player, or I can, program. We need to hire a pro to do this. So I feel like that if I have a one superpower, it's knowing when I'm not good enough.
You know what? I'll tell you right now, brother, that is a strength.
Yeah.
I think it's very important to know what you do well, and equally as important to know what you don't.
Yeah.
And to be able to suss that out.
Yeah.
To be able to give that away without it hurting your feelings.
Yeah.
Because it's not the product, but the song, the creation, at the end of the day, is really the thing to be honored.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter who does that, as long as that gets done, and it's done in a curated sense and in a masterful sense.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a great difference between mastery and celebrity.
Yeah.
And which is something I think maybe we haven't forgotten it, but in some ways we've allowed maybe commerce to take over some of these things, and to not produce on the level that you're talking about. Once again, I think it's just about empowering artists, and and giving away, which I think is beautiful. What you both are doing is giving away, to another generation, to a younger generation, and not just taking.
Yeah.
That's got to make you feel good.
It does, for sure. And I mean, we, community here in Calgary, like when you look at how many talented people there are coming up, like just even in the songwriting community alone, we've seen some people through their teens that are now, cutting big records with big producers, and to know that we planted a seed, if in whatever way, even if it was just being welcoming and kind and creating an environment where they could offer whatever stage of the business they were at, that they felt comfortable to come through the doors and share their best, and that we were able to introduce them to some people, feels great for us.
And that's a great point that you bring up, and we were talking about this before we started today, which is, Calgary really being as a geographical location for curation and for the teaching of mastery, and having other entities in the city involved in the process of that on a scale that is just not necessarily, Troy and Joni.
For sure. Even we were talking to some young artists that I was writing with yesterday, and just the fact that we were talking, they're not from Calgary, but they came in to make this a destination, a creative destination. And when you think about it, we have the songwriting, so that was certainly our component to their trip, is like coming to write songs, but also we have the studio scene that becomes that place to record the songs. There's certainly much more of a live venue opportunity to play the shows here. Like really, you've got like some of the main industry players that are like located here. You've got the National Music Center. Like we've got a very strong music business hub. And we look at places like Nashville and LA and certainly New York as like creative hubs for people to go to and kind of make a pilgrimage to, but we don't necessarily have those centers here in Canada. And I would say we're probably on the cusp of being that for Canada, because we are trying to, I'm not a person that believes that anyone with any talent goes down to Nashville, New York, or LA, that we can have our own identity as a creative destination here in Canada and be that. And then certainly that's why we've chosen to stay here.
Absolutely, and that's such a great point, because you're right, and here's the other thing too, like on an educational side of things, we think of industry, LA and Nashville and New York and things like that, but arguably the best music school on the planet is in Boston.
For sure.
And why? I've always asked myself that, why? There's some great schools in Boston, don't get me wrong, but musically, that's not necessarily a hub that we think of yet. Berkeley exists in Boston, Massachusetts. Yeah. And so when you say Calgary, why is it that Calgary, even if it's not for industry's sake, but for the sake of education and things like that, and I'm not saying that industry couldn't be a part of Calgary, but for education and perhaps for all of these things, I think it's time for us to start believing in ourselves and believing in each other. I mean, that's why I do this show. Because, you know, when I hear the name Troy and Joni, I'm almost going to call you TRONI. And maybe I just should. You know
Just
what I
do
mean?
it,
Yeah, I
TRONI.
won't have to edit, and it'll be a shorter podcast. You know, you guys represent that. And there are other people of your ilk out there doing this thing. And when I think about Calgary, and I think about all the great artists, when I think about the great singers, I think that we shortchange ourselves. And I firmly believe that we could be doing a better job. What that takes, I don't know. I mean, I'll put it out there right now that I'm going after the National Film Board to do a national documentary. Now, I've said it, and now I have to do it. And it's really along these lines of asking ourselves, where are the musicians, and are they being taken care of? I mean, on a financial level, are they able to create? Are they able to take the time to create? Because not all people are created equal in this respect. You know what I mean? Some people have more challenges. They could be financial, they could be otherwise. And so, are we taking care of that? And what are we discussing in our lyrical content these days? You know what I mean? I mean, there's Russia and arguably the United States and the Ukraine. You know, there's the China problem. There's you know, lots of things going on in the States, and they are writing about those things. You know, they're NPR radio and stuff like that. They've got some good shows with musicians and stuff like that. And what are we writing about? You know, like, where is our focus?
I do think the pandemic has made people more introspective. Certainly, I think I've written songs. I don't know if you would feel the same way, but you know,
Has that? Yeah, let me ask that question generally to both of you. Has you know, this pandemic and what we've been going through, has it affected the way you write? Has it affected your consciousness, the way you think?
I definitely feel like it has for me. You know, when I was talking earlier about how, you know, we were producing and you know, our demos, and started producing my own work, and out of that experience, I reinserted myself into the Indigenous community. I'm Métis. Didn't have my Métis card, went out, got my Métis card, got into the Indigenous community, and I think at first it was selfishly because I thought, well, I could, you know, get more shows and meet more people and sort of expand my network. But one of the really sort of eye-opening, surprising things to me was that the Indigenous community is all about saying something that is meaningful. And so over this, you know, over the pandemic, one of the things I've really been trying to focus on is like, okay, like I've done this body of work, and I'm not, you know, I'm proud of it, and it's great, and, you know, I want to do something with it, fine. But the next thing that I'm working on, I really want to make sure that there are things that I want to say about the world, and things that I want to say about other, because even the last single I put it out in a flash, because I had some, you know, I had reasons to do that. But, you know, really what I want to do is I want to make sure that we're trying to utilize our skills to at least share something and to broaden sort of what we're trying to say. And I think, you know, that's nice and good for us. But I think the other side of it too is that creatively, when I look at our creative community, and I'm not just talking Calgary, I'm talking like globally. People are putting out music, and you know, and they're putting out at a vastly massive rate than ever before in the world. And it seems that as we move forward in this creative world that we're in, that a lot of that message, you know, and a lot of the ability to bring a message, I feel, is being lost. You know, the ability to say something meaningful and have it be heard is really tough. And I think that when I look at radio, when I look at even film and TV, I kind of feel like we're getting into this place where we're sort of just regurgitating the same ideas. We're bringing back old ideas, and we're bringing, you know, and we're kind of, we're doing this. And part of me thinks, man, like, I don't know how long that can last. Because at some point, the listeners are going to be like, well, we've seen that before. You know, so I feel like trying to impart some of myself into and share some of my hurts, or it's the least I can do.
Your reality,
Yeah.
even, right? And let me say, you know, I mean, I don't tend toward nihilism on this program, but I do think that, you know, both sides are important. You know, what you're talking about, the industry side, well, rejoicing and suffering, right?
Yeah.
So
Commerce and art,
yeah,
right?
and where do those things, what is the balance in that? Because like you're saying, Troy, I mean, we have seen a shift in balance in these things. I don't think that needs to be debated. I think it's just the truth. Globally, that's the truth. That's where we are. And to not tend towards nihilism, I still think that you're correct, that in the sense we are regurgitating. It's almost like we're laughing so hard we can't stop crying. You know what I mean? Like we want. And yet all the material and all the things to discuss and all the things to speak about and sing about and create with are right there in front of us. And if it is that it's a moment not of nihilism but of truth, I don't think there's anything wrong with speaking to that. I think the only reason that we would feel guilty is because there is necessarily something pushing us away from the truth. Yeah. And
I think that the needle in the haystack, sort of that mentality like you're talking about, we're being saturated just because it's so accessible. It's so easy to put together. As great as it is and as accessible as that makes it for somebody who maybe had barriers to going into a studio and making music, and now they can do it at home with their phone or their laptop, it has created this very, very, very saturated environment where it's trying to find a great song is a needle in a haystack. And I think what we keep trying to do is like say, okay, that might be the case, is that it's harder to find the needles, but what if you just created a box of needles and you found a place where people were really looking for that, right? And so to me, the double-edged sword is, yes, the internet and streaming makes it so easy to publish a haystack full of maybe not needles. And then the other side is that it allows you to find people who are really interested in what you do. And like I think about artists like Jason Isbell and the popularity that he's had. He doesn't need some of the other channels because he's found people who really just want the box of needles that he's able to create, right?
Well, and let me, if I can just speak to that just for a second, because I think that's a great point. And I think that, we are saturated. I also think that there's an education, especially of the young, that you talk about sitting there in their bedroom, with their Mac, typing that out and trying to get something happening, that we've educated them towards commerce. Right? That is what music has been. Even Zappa noticed it in the 60s, right? That it's a commercial thing. And I think that's why it's so vital what you guys are doing. That you're taking artists and not necessarily saying, well, it's not about, the money you can make or the gains that you can make that way, but it's also about being honest. It's also about telling the truth through your storytelling and through your songwriting. And, you wrote some things with Sarah Beth Keeley as well that to me, to this day, still stand as well. That whole record to me still stands as a needle in a lost and forgotten haystack, and I think that that's really too bad. I really do, because there was some great writing on there. The playing was great. There was a song about alcoholism. There was you know what I mean? Those are the kinds of songs, I don't know, maybe I am nihilistic, but those are the kinds of songs I like to hear about. I like to hear about truth, whether it's rejoicing in it or suffering through it.
And I think the other part too about artists, speaking about artists that have not had the opportunity to be heard or probably haven't had their due, I think a lot of what we try to do now, because of the digital era, is we spend a little bit of time sort of trying to guide artists in the sense of like making sure that when they are releasing their music or they're doing whatever they're doing, that they're taking the steps, because I think as artists, all we really want to do is just sing, play, and put it out. But there's a whole other business side, and for us, we've probably dug into that now more than ever. We started a little record label, we have our publishing company, and we spend probably at least half of our time just working on business stuff, doing admin stuff, sending out emails, planning tours, or whatever the case may be. But all of that is to fuel when we're releasing a single. We have a single coming out on the 23rd of September. And we we do all of those things so that when time comes and we're releasing something, that we've built ourselves a little infrastructure, you know, that I have a list of all the radio people that have supported us, and I know who played us last time, and I can go out and I can release my stuff to radio, as opposed to, you know, new artists that are starting out, or if they don't have that support, because you'll notice that there's a lot of education for brand new people, and there's tons of support for people that are making money. And that middle ground here, where you've got your music and you kind of know what you want to do, but you don't have the business side. That is where predatorial business practices come in, and that's where most of the people will start to spend, you know, tens of thousands of dollars, but not have the support or the knowledge or the the guidance to actually execute their ideas. And for me personally, that is the group that we focus on, is that sort of middle ground, because that's where people will quit, you know, because it's like they put all this time and effort to come up with these songs and spend tens of, you know, decades singing, and then they do this thing and it fails, and in their mind it's like it's over, you know, I'm not good enough, or whatever the case may be.
Well,
so.
I think a lot of that, though, and you know, of course, there's an argument for the very top echelon to be extremely rapacious too. I'm reading a book called Bodies right now,
Right.
The Death of the Musician, and at the top of the business, well, you have business people taking care of the business of the people that just remain, you know, filling up their bathtubs with baked beans and, you know,
Sure.
that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then you have that middle ground, which is, yes, the place where the musician tends to do all the work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, our big rule of thumb is that you can have a bad day in the music business, but the fact we allow ourselves to have a bad day once in a while in the music business. We just can't have the bad day on the same day. So somebody's got to give the pep talk.
Yeah,
so
sure,
that's how we
That's just a
function.
relationship thing in general.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's good advice.
Yeah, no, and maybe that's why you guys are
Still
sticking
good.
it out and
Well,
hanging
you know,
around.
you've
And
never seen us argue over laundry,
Yeah,
so
true.
like, you know,
that's I don't live with you, and you really get to know somebody
it's
when
true.
you live with them.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on something really quick,
Yeah.
which is the indigeneity
Yeah.
aspect that you were talking about.
Yeah.
You know, I was involved for a while, over the span of a year. I gave my time to this project, and then I started to produce a mini documentary for it and things of this nature. I found that there was a duality of, how do I say it, you know, of hope and anger.
Yeah.
How do you feel about, you know, I mean, with everything that's going on with the kids and the schools and what does that make you feel?
I think for me, and I had spoken about this before, is that because my mother, who is a child of you know, residential runaways, and she was in a residential school for a period of time, she really tried to basically cut me off from that community, and it wasn't because of anything else, but just trying to be a good mom, because of you know, the things that had gone on in the past. Those kids, as they were growing up, and, you know, coming out of residential schools, abandoned, you know, neglected, and all messed up from probably God knows what was happening in those communities. Some of those communities, you know, they come out. Our family, we had, you know, alcoholism, you know, and there was, you know, we have a plethora of people in our family that, you know, I've been to prison for dealing drugs and killing people and all sorts of stuff. So for me, growing up, you know, and all of this, when the, you know, they found the children in the graves, and we're talking about Indigenous, you know, residential schools, and I really kind of went back, and I had to sort of do a sanity check to look back at my own lineage and to think about the things that I struggle with as a human being, and just feeling good about myself and feeling confident, and I realized that, you know, a lot of my decisions and a lot of my you know, sort of behaviors are based in shame. And that shame is, you know, I realize it's like, it's passed down from generation to generation. And I personally feel that we can't, and this is just my humble opinion, I'm of the belief that we cannot blame anyone that's alive today for what's going on. All we can do is look at what's happened, and we can do what we can. You know, I look at, so what can I do to make a difference? You know, it's hard because, you know, British colonialism, like the Queen just passed away, and so, you know, you've got one side that's really sad to see her go because she was a sweet lady, and then you have the other side talking about British colonialism and how that was, you know, really hard on the world and all of the things that came out of that. But in all fairness, you know, I look at it like, well, this is true. We need to talk about it and understand it. I need to understand it to understand who I am. But I think also too that we don't do ourselves a service by not saying, okay, well, what can we do now? You know, what can we do now to make things better? Me as a songwriting producer, Métis living in Calgary, what can I do to make a difference? And so I think if we all take that step, if we all sort of make that decision to do that, then no matter where we go, it'll always be good. You know?
Yeah, I had a conversation with somebody, a white individual, that said, you know, we shouldn't be helping the indigenous.
Yeah.
Because of this sort of white messianic complex that we seem to have, or whatever. And I said, well, then can I just help people?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because outside of my Ukrainianness and your indigeneity, we're all people.
Yeah.
And so I would, you know, I want to frame things that way without, you know, I can acknowledge absolutely what happened. And, you know, I mean, personally, the Queen was alive when these things were happening.
Yeah.
She was alive when Kenya was happening.
Yeah.
She was alive during all these things. She knew about it, absolutely.
Yeah.
But she's gone now, so, you know, what do we do? I mean, you know, it's a funny thing because it seems to me the story that you're telling was this, you know, colonialism did this to you, but now act like a colonialist. It starts this whole thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, and we talked about this before. We got on today, and that's why I think we are really coming to the precipice, you know, sort of being challenged to go through the eye of the needle, if you will, where we need to strip ourselves of the old and the archaic and the things that don't work in order to pass into a new civilization.
Well, and I think that's too for JONI and I, like we asked ourselves, like, what can we do? What are some things we can do to make a difference and do with, you know, of course we're musicians, so it's like, what can we do musically? So we're planning to do a tour in the spring, we're planning to do a tour of small communities that can't afford music entertainment, but we're not only going there to play, we're bringing some well-known artists with us, but we're also going there to help mentor and give guidance to the music programs and the people that are interested in getting into the music business and help connect them to the sort of greater community. And so that's our little give back. And I think as musicians and as artists, that's the one thing that we can do. And I think it affects a lot of change because, you know, you know, as well as anybody else, that, you know, our music is our dreams. It's who we are. It's our soul. And so if we can tap into that with someone who's going through a hard time or feels alone or feels isolated, that's a huge power that we can give them back. And it's for us, it's effortless, right? Because
I think to that degree of like Pickup Truck, we kind of joked about it earlier, but that was a career song for Shane Yellowbird, who became a real symbol of inspiration to hit, like, individuals here in Alberta and across the country. We certainly saw that in his passing, people saying how important it was, and that representation to see an Indigenous artist do so well on a national and international stage. Shane traveled to different countries, and for that, you know, to put an Indigenous person on the map for country music was really, you know, if that's even the only thing we were able to do, it was something big, right? You know, Troy toured with him, and they, you know, other Indigenous people in the crowds were so, we've met so many of them over the years that just like thought the world of Shane and identified with his success, with their own success and their own hope, and that was a huge thing for us.
Yeah. Well, I think he and Shane, as much as I knew him, you know, I knew his guitar player fairly well, and I think, you know, duality was sort of the key to Shane, you know, for as much as I know, And there was, I think, this drive and this determination and this, desire to be and to overcome. And at the same time, there was, the sad other side that we all possess as human beings. We don't know. I think that side of us, that harbors both the greatest benevolence and the most horrible nefariousness. And to know that about each and every one of us, for ourselves to recognize that in ourselves, I think is a very important thing. And that's where I think honest writing comes from.
Yeah, for sure. And I think also too that the one thing about Shane, I was talking with the folks at CBC and they said, what do you think is his legacy? And for me, when I look back at his years, and especially when we were first touring, it was just him and I. And all I really remember is how much he loved to connect and with his fans and anybody that was interested in his music or was interested in music in general. He was incredibly generous with his time and his advice. Unlike usually when people become, famous and they're well known, they tend to sort of shut the door. And I don't know what that's about, but for whatever reason, Shane just never did that. And I always admired him for that, because it was never, no one was ever too small for him to have a conversation with and impart his wisdom. And so, that was a part of him that, I was, had the privilege of seeing, but I took some of that away with me after we toured, and just remembered that it's like, it made a difference in a lot of people's lives. So, and I think that's something that every musician can do.
Well, and that's a good lesson that you learned. I think also, when I think about Shane or anyone like him that may have been suffering and may suffer, I also think of that side of the music community. I won't say business or industry, although they could do something for it. But I think about the human side. The side that is in pain, the side that does hurt, and doesn't feel like it has anywhere to go. And
isn't that why we all became artists?
Yeah, totally.
Well, it is, right?
100%. I know. I was even thinking about you talking about, when giving back to the Indigenous communities we plan to visit. It's more than just giving them an opportunity to speak or to have success in the music business. It's actually giving permission and hopefully assistance to people who have something to say in whatever form, commercial or not, or just therapeutic value of getting it out.
That is so beautiful.
And to me, that's the
everything.
hope, right?
Well, that's so beautiful. It is a viable way to express yourself, that your thoughts matter, that your thoughts on paper and on some sort of carbon footprint do matter, and what you have inside you can become, whether you become great, the ability can become great, and you can give away, and you can inspire, and you can do, and I think that's what I love about what you guys are doing. I mean, I didn't know this when you and I talked in emails mostly, you know what I mean? We weren't having these discussions, and that's so beautiful that you guys are doing that. Is there anything you guys want to say? Like, I know you have a single coming out.
Yeah, we have a single coming out. It's called Big Vacation, and I think probably the thing I've enjoyed most about it is that JONI's idea was that we were going to travel around all the places of interest around Alberta, and so the video is myself and JONI standing in the same spot in every single shot, and behind us is the world's largest Easter egg and the world's largest pierogi, and
hey, you're a man after my own.
Yeah, exactly. The Matart Conservatory and the Calgary Tower, and so we're going to, I think, 60 shots or 60 locations, and so we're going to do this. So it's been really fun over the holidays, over the summer. We've been going out every weekend and seeing every single spot you could ever want to see in Alberta. So it's been really cool to do that, and I think JONI's going to do a little bit of a web page on it, and so that's been a super joyful thing. And I think for us, starting this duo, Scarlett Butler, has really been not only about, because originally it started out with us, like, we got all these songs we've written for other commercial country artists, we have a record label, we have a studio, let's just release some stuff. It doesn't cost us any money, or very little, let's just do it. And so we started doing that. And the interesting part for me was like, we just took that one little step, and all of a sudden all these doors started opening up for us. People were asking us to play festivals and do, we did the CCMA media launch. We played, JONI did a couple of shows. We're playing a festival in October. And so I feel like it was just so, so serendipitous for us to just start this kind of like on a whim. And I think the most wonderful part about it is we get to do it together. So, I'm not traveling out to do a show. We're doing this stuff, with, me riding shotgun and her driving the right
I do like to drive.
You do like to drive.
Yeah.
So Scarlett Butler.
Yeah.
Explain that, but before you do,
Yeah.
does it have anything to do with Scarlett O'Hara?
It absolutely
Okay.
does.
Okay.
So Troy has released records under Troy Kokol. I have also released records under JONI, Delaurier, and plan to continue to do that. But we wanted something that was ours, so that we can still have our own solo identities and our own solo pursuits, but that, so Gone with the Wind I'm a huge Gone with the Wind fan, and Scarlett O'Hara, everyone knows her as Scarlett O'Hara, and everyone knows Rhett Butler as Rhett Butler, but for the time that they were married, her name was Scarlett Butler, and so, but nobody thinks of that, and so we kind of wanted something that represented that it's okay to have individual identities inside this package, and that it's something that we can do together. And I mean, we still plan to, we write separately with other artists, we release our own stuff separately, but we really wanted something that we could just do for fun, and something that we want to see the world together. And we thought Scarlett Butler would be a really fun way to go out and play. We love the connect, as much as we love to sit in our basement and write songs with artists, we really love connecting with audiences. And I feel like we both got into the music business to be a loving presence, and we can just reach more people as musicians than as dental hygienists. So that's why we're here. And but Scarlett Butler has been like an amazing thing. We ended up with a top 50 Billboard Canada song, totally by happenstance, by doing something good. And so we are doing, we're not sure, are we country, are we folk, are we, like to quote the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, are we folk or country? What? Seems like everybody cares but us.
Or the Osmonds, you're a little country.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I don't know who's, you're a little bit rock and roll. I'm a little bit country, I guess.
No.
But anyway, we've just been taking it one day at a time, one song at a time, trying to your point, not suck. Write something that doesn't suck, and that. But not all of it is heavy and serious.
Right.
We just try to make it good and meaningful.
And joyful.
And joyful.
And shouldn't be. And that's a hell of a note. And don't knock dental hygienists.
I was gonna admire you. Kind of smiled.
Yeah, they're important. They're very important people. But I get you. That's a hell of a note to leave it on too. I thank you for sitting here with me.
Thank you.
I know this town needs you and people like you. And I'm glad, if not to call you friend, certainly a damn good acquaintance.
Yeah.
And so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our pleasure to be here.
Our pleasure, yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll see you all for the next episode. I hope you enjoyed this one. See you all soon.
Awesome.
Good job.
That was so fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, man, we covered a lot of ground in there. Like, yeah.